Hello there, everyone. Greg from the association here, and I'm with Michael and Robbie from StoryCube. As discussed in the blog post, over the last year or so, Michael and Robbie have been supporting many of our members who are looking to generate earned income through new enterprise activities. And in the blog, we talk through the StoryCube framework and also some of the common blind spots for social sector organizations when it comes to trading and enterprise and trying to market it and sell those. However, we wanted to give some extra time to a couple of other areas that we feel need some spotlight too. The first one of these is around mindset, and I've worked with many organizations who fully recognize the importance of selling, but often feel like they need someone else external to come in to the organization and be that specialist salesperson for them to make that happen. But often, my observation is that often those within the organization are best placed to sell those products and services because they really live and breathe the purpose of those organizations. But it'd be really great to hear Michael and Robbie's thoughts on this as they work with many organizations battling through these issues.
So look, people don't often see themselves as salespeople. They see themselves, they might see themselves as founders, they've got a mission, you're trying to do something good with the world, but actually there's almost, we get caught up in this situation when we try and put these labels on things. And I think that's where, you talk about mindset, where it's easy to find yourself feeling as if the thing you're doing day to day, which is building a strong product or trying to run an important service, talking to customers, maybe doing research, understanding who your competitors are, all of these different things are somehow completely different from sales when they're not. All of this is really, if you boil everything down, if you're running a social enterprise or really any kind of organization, you are in a position to tell people why what you do is important and to get them to understand that in a way that makes sense to them. And so, of course, there are lots of tools. You can go on a sales training course, you can you can use bits of software, or you can read 100 books and you find frameworks and all sorts that might work for you. And again, it depends on your personality and whatever, that might be great. But I think the fundamental mindset shift is what we have found is most useful for people. And I know on a purely personal note, I've always, I see myself, I'm sure, as I think most people do, as I'm not really a salesperson. I don't really like being sold to. I don't like any of that stuff. But what I can do, and what I do like, is someone telling me a compelling story about what they've got to offer that I can either say to, oh, that's really interesting. That's not really for me, but you know what? I've got a friend who might like that. I'll pass on their website. Or say, well, hold on, this is really interesting. This is exactly what I'm after. And then you're at a different stage. You're no longer doing that kind of, apprentice style selling, like door-to-door selling, whatever it is you think might be the case. You're making those connections. And part of that really, I think, is sort of just being able to frame what you do in a way that is comfortable for you to talk about, and in a way that is obviously comfortable for the customer or whatever audience you're trying to reach to hear. And really, all of that will come down to just having done some work and being really clear on the value proposition, right? What is at the heart of what you offer? What is the thing that you are picking up and saying, I need you to give you some money, I need you to give me some money or some time or some energy or all three, in order for me to put that across. So if you're doing counseling services, or if you've got a product that you're selling to raise money to support a particular issue or whatever it is, there is something that if you take yourself out of the sales situation and you're talking to a friend, or you're just writing your own business plan or whatever it might be, what you're trying to give people, what you're trying to achieve for them. And that may, of course, be different from the exact service. It may be that it's about, helping people to feel better or happier, an emotional outcome like that. It might be that there's a sort of side benefit in terms of people getting their time back, or that you're providing expertise that they need that they can't unlock anywhere else, all of those kind of things. And really, I'd say to people, take the time and take the effort to really go deep into that, and don't think of it as sales. And then when you get to the point where you're stood in front of someone who's saying, which you might be, like maybe you're at a conference or you're doing cold calls or whatever it might be, or you're having to write copy for your website or something, when you eventually get to that point, if you're in the mindset of simply saying, I am going to tell a story about why we matter and why you should care about us, everything's much simpler. And also accept that people will say no, right? Accept that people might say, okay, that's not of any interest to me, thank you very much. And that's okay. If anything, that's quite useful because you're not wasting your time, no one's getting anxious, and you end up. And the final thing I just throw in, and then Michael, I'm sure will have some additional thoughts, is you've got to be confident with all of that. So you've got to hustle and you've got to go out there and you've got to be willing to have those conversations, both to learn what works and what people respond to, but just to get that information in the first place. If you're too kind of, let's speak candidly, if you're too embarrassed, to sort of share your story, or you think that people aren't going to care about it, whatever, well, you're not going to get anywhere, are you? You're not actually going to be in any place. And it doesn't matter whether you're asking for, customers, or you're trying to get donations, or you're looking to, applying for funding through public bodies or whatever it could be. You need to position yourself as saying you're worthy of this, you deserve this, this is something that is important to you. Because if you don't believe that, then that sale, as it were, is never going to happen.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And just to build on top, I'd say it's really important to look at what the size of the business is, or what stage the business is at, whether it's a charity, social enterprise, or private profit-making business as well. It's the same sort of challenge at the certain sizes. So when first starting out, and we work with a lot of startups, small businesses and scaling businesses, there's a founder or a number of founders involved and a small team, and maybe up to 10, maybe even 15 people. But still the founders and the directors probably have to do a lot of the sales work. And it doesn't necessarily come naturally to everybody. I've never really met anyone who's completely comfortable with sales, even salespeople that do it day in, day out. They have a technique. They've learnt lots of tricks and tips along the way. They have lots of tactics they can implement. But at the end of the day, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes they feel very comfortable in the flow. And sometimes they have to go back to the drawing board and look at the competition and the market around them and think maybe we need to improve things to make these better. So at the start, essentially, it's really important for the founders to be front and center, to be telling the story. And that's really it. It's not selling. It's not trying to con someone, trying to convince someone of something that they shouldn't want or need. It's explaining exactly what it is that you're doing, what problem you're solving for people, what solution you can bring, why is that important at all, and then as an organization, how you're different, and putting that structure together just to tell the story, to explain and share your passion, particularly as a social enterprise or charity, for what you're doing and the impact that you're trying to create. To some extent, it's easier than for a private sector company who may be selling something like doorknobs or something very, very mundane, could be very profitable, but trying to put a story around that beyond maybe there's a 50 to 100 years of heritage is tough, because there's a lot of other businesses doing the same sort of thing. But when you talk about impact and the social impact that's brought, and the ways you can differentiate in how you're going to create that impact, that's interesting. And as time goes on, hopefully the organization will grow. I'd say the middle part of that growth, maybe 25 to 50 people, is pretty tricky. That's probably when you need more salespeople to help support the founders and the directors. And you probably need marketing people, social media people, maybe external agencies doing paid advertising, and people actually picking up the phone and doing cold calls and arranging meetings. That could be internal or external. But as the organization grows, I think the next stage, if let's say 100 people in the organization, the founders therefore become front and center again. They shouldn't be doing the day-to-day tasks, but they should be pitching and promoting and presenting the organization as a whole. So they should be on podcasts and webinars and at events and being the keynote speaker. It is all selling, but not as we know it. It's not picking up the phone and promoting a business and trying to sell a service or a product, but it is keeping the organization front and center. It is explaining what they do to create impact, how they're growing, or simply just telling the story, just to make sure that everyone who is relevant, partners, suppliers, customers, investors, and the press and the wider audience are aware of this organization, and therefore opportunities will open. And that's basically the main aim of the game, really. It's creating opportunities so that therefore a sale of whatever kind is needed is possible. So it's never ending, and I think it's for everybody in the team to be aware of. But if they think about storytelling rather than selling, then they'll probably feel more comfortable with it.
Absolutely, yeah. I see organizations every day who are so comfortable with talking about their organization and why it matters from a mission perspective. It's really just kind of switching to that mindset when they're in a more sales environment. And your point, Robbie, about kind of getting over that no or potential no, I think is a really big thing as well. I think probably once you're over the first one, then it gets easier, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's always experience, that's the point. I think you get battle hardened to so many things in life, and that seems normal and natural, whether it's being getting to work in the first place, and then becoming a parent, running a business or an enterprise is no different. You just have to learn to roll with the kinds of punches that are going to come, and it's very normal. Of course, it's going to be a smaller percentage of yeses than nos. Like, that's just normal. And I think that's the other thing, is always to just related to that, but is to not be pissed off by it, and not feel that you're somehow doing a bad job of selling because not everyone says yes. No one's going to say yes to everything. You don't. And I find it always very useful to put you back in the seat of the consumer or the customer or the client. You're not going to say yes to everything. So other people aren't always going to say yes to you. That's completely logical, completely normal. But of course, it's easy to get defensive and to feel, that somehow, you're not doing it right or something's wrong. Best keep going. Try and learn something, and obviously if it happens 1,000 times with no yeses, then maybe there's something that's gone fundamentally wrong. But yeah, you know what you do best, and you need to if you believe in that story, which you presumably do if you're out there, even in a position to be selling anything to anyone, then it's your role is simply to get people excited about what you do. It's the easiest way to think about it.
One major thing, just to build on that, is the tricky part of sales is, I think for me at least, or other salespeople or founders I speak to, is about the unknowns. You can do all these activities, and it's one of those things in business and the professional world. You can do a lot of hard work, you can be very active, but things don't always work out, and you don't always get the sales, or at least the number of sales that you want. And being aware at the very start that a 5% conversion rate is actually pretty good, then that's something that really changes the perspective on things. And a lot of people that aren't part of the sales world and haven't gone to do the online courses or even degrees in terms of sales and marketing and digital creativity and things like that, they don't understand that necessarily. And so when that's shared, that 5 out of 100 people may say yes, not a definite yes, they may say yes for some convincing, those numbers are pretty low, but that can be improved. But equally, on the other end of the spectrum, it's a case of, well, if only 5% are going to say yes, then 95% who say no, that's not so bad. So I don't have to feel like beating myself up about it. I can think of this a bit more like a game and say, well, could I get 5%? Could I get 10%? Would that be a good day if I called 100 people this week and 10 of those within a month or two came back to me and responded positively, and continue that conversation? Because it's not instant either. It's not the end of the week. You get 10 people saying, yes, please, let's buy your service now. Maybe 1 or 2, which is great, but you've got to give it time for people to consider what they're doing. So the unknowns are the really tricky part. And I saw a lot of that over the summer as well, even with seasoned salespeople and business groups that have been set up for salespeople as well. They talked a lot about the summer lull, particularly this year, or potentially because of 2 years of pandemic, and the fact that probably a lot of people went on holiday this year, went abroad. There's pent-up demand for that. People really wanted to get away. They were eager to take their time off and have a work-life balance, understandably. But it meant that July and August were very quiet. plus the world events going on around us, inflation, energy prices, war. There's a lot of uncertainty, and a lot of those potential customers who were on the fence had suddenly drawn back and either gone away and were waiting for after the summer, or had paused the whole project completely for various different industries. And it was just a general note on LinkedIn, social networks, and business groups that it was a tough time, and salespeople were questioning themselves, and probably still are, and we'll wait to see what happens over the next few months. But even seasoned salespeople will have tough times and think, okay, need to rethink this, need to look at my story again, need to look at the strategies. Has the world around me changed? Should I pick up some new techniques, or is it just a lull and we'll continue as usual in a month's time?
Yeah, definitely. That shows it's an iterative process, isn't it? Getting that story right, and also always checking in with the mindset and the environment of who you're trying to sell to. I think that's constantly important. Thanks very much, both. That's really, really useful insight. The other area we wanted to talk about today was around that of grappling with multiple audiences. This is something that came up time and time and again during the sessions that we ran for members of the association, but I think it's something you've seen, with lots of others too. It's not a unique challenge to those in health and social care. I think it's the case for many social sector organisations, whether it's that they're trying to sell to businesses and members of the public, or whether they're also considering messaging to funders as well. And often I think it kind of frazzles organisations a little bit, and they don't know how to move forward. So again, it'd be great to hear your thoughts on this kind of area.
Yeah, I've seen this quite a few times. My agency, the House Branding and Marketing Agency, does specifically work with charities and social enterprises. So we get similar briefs. Often they want a brand, they want to market themselves, they want to maybe launch or relaunch. They definitely want a new website, and they have all these audiences to take into account. They've often think about their trustees, their staff, their end beneficiaries, potentially their customers if they're social enterprises and they're actually selling something. Partners they have to consider, investors, funders, governments, schools. The list goes on, and sometimes all of those different audiences can be for one charity. It is difficult, and for anything, if you're trying to move forward, trying to think of multiple numbers of anything is tricky, and it can confuse you and almost paralyze you and stop you from moving forward. So every time I talk with charities about this, I say, right, we're going to have to prioritize. Obviously everyone's important, but let's be serious about this and sit down and prioritize, because we can't position ourselves for everybody. We can't please everybody, particularly with charities which are potentially helping end beneficiaries that actually don't have any clue that there's a charity involved. All they know is that there's an individual that helps them every week with whatever need they have, but they don't know there's a website or a brand or an organization or 100 people in a company behind it. And they don't need to know, because the funders need to know that, and the government organizations need to know that, and the school perhaps who have commissioned the project needs to know that. And sometimes the audiences could be very different. Funders tend to be adults and trustees, and even maybe in their 40s or 50s plus, whereas the end beneficiaries might actually be children under the age of 10. And so the needs are going to be completely different, even if you are trying to communicate with both groups at the same time, or a few number of groups. So a couple of examples. Worked with a organization that does financial education in schools. But again, these are the ones like I highlighted earlier, that the school kids, they didn't really get a choice of who came into their school and taught them about financial education. So they are enjoying the benefits of the workshops. These volunteers or experts came in and delivered the sessions, but the end beneficiaries don't necessarily go to a website and find out about this organization. Now for the org, they really need to keep funded, to stay funded. So they need to get commissioned projects from schools, they need to get payments, and therefore they need to convince schools. But largely, they need external funding as well from corporates, from government organisations and other charities as well, and investors. So they needed to appeal to them. At first, they wanted to appeal to everybody, but it turned out actually we need to make a youth-friendly brand and a youth-friendly website, because it is a charity for young people, but the information and the way it's communicated needs to be clearly promoted to funders and positioned to encourage them to understand that this is a very professional, established charity that's doing great work, that has social impact, and has been around for a good decade and will continue to do that. And they need, as a charity, they need the funding in various formats to therefore go and deliver the work to the end beneficiaries, and do what they do. So it's different conversations, and it just took it away from, oh, hold on, who are we looking to promote to first? Where's the priority? Funders, anyone who's going to basically help the organization be sustainable. Who we therefore need to help next? Well, we definitely need to help the end beneficiaries, because without them, there'll be no social impact. So it is a cycle, but the priority made it a lot easier to do the project. So a similar thing for a charity that helps stop people going to prison, try to put them back on the right path, but also goes into prisons and runs workshops and various community groups to encourage them to get on a better path and then come out of prison and hopefully not return. Again, the people who were in the workshops had no idea even that the charity existed, and that was fine. But they did know that John or Sally or Peter were the people in that workshop helping them, and that came every week and supported them. And so the main focus of the website at that point was, again, let's talk to the funders and let's talk about social impact and let's talk about the bigger picture. And therefore it made the job of sharing that information. What messages do we want to promote? How do we want to speak? What's the tone of voice? What's the value proposition? All of that becomes much easier because you're speaking to a small number of audiences and not multiple audiences. So in short, you often need to speak to all audiences at some point, but you need a different value proposition for each one. And in our framework, we call it a story cube. So a different story cube for each one, where 80% of the story is the same, but that 20% makes the difference depending on which audience you're talking to. And therefore you can adapt it slightly with the tone of voice and how it's delivered as well.
I think with that, some people get sort of frustrated or confused about what they do very specifically with assets like a website. And I think what happens is that, to the point that Michael's made, you need to make some decisions about, who that audience is you're speaking to. But sometimes it can be tough in that you need to communicate two things across, and you are called, companyx.co.uk, and people go there. The worst thing I think you can do, and this is just advice for life really, in anything, is not make a decision about how you're going to put that stuff across. The best thing you can do in the first step is to say, we're going to focus on this audience and we're going to get our information through this channel, and that's what we're going to do. If you have, though, for example, and if we say something like Airbnb, which is a two-sided marketplace, you've got, I'm looking for a house, I've got a house to put up for rent. Actually, just be confident about that. If you're like, look, we need to speak to two people, and take them off in different directions, like have a big button that says, actually, I'm a funder and I've come here because I'm saying, and there's a big button, because it's just signposting, right? All of this is signposting people in the right place so you can talk to them the right way in all the ways that Michael just outlined. I think an additional sort of furtherance to that is understanding the right media for the right audiences. So, you may find, in the case you just used, Michael, I imagine the prisoners probably did have access to the internet in one way, shape or other, but they're not going to be looking up the details of the companies they're going to. So of course that channel makes sense to the funders. Similarly, a poster stuck up in the prison itself that can be seen by people who are interested is going to be seen by the prisoners, is definitely not going to be seen by the funders who are not in the prison. So, that's a sort of ridiculous extreme example, but once you sort of get your head around that, you can say to yourself, okay, whether it's children under 10, or it's, you know, someone in local government who's going to give some funding, or it's parents, or it's young professionals, or it's whatever it is. What is the channel and the approach that's going to reach them? I think a conversation we have all the time with businesses is, what do I do about social media? Like, what do I do with this thing? It's so important. It's taken over our lives. And the answer to that is the answer to anything else. It's like, is your audience on social media? And are you able to tell your story effectively on social media? And do you want to even do that? If the answer to those questions is yes, the most important thing being that your audience are there, then great, do that. But equally, we often talk to people who say, well, no, I don't think that's not where we're going to reach people. We say, well, don't do it then. Like, don't do it just because Meta and Google and whoever else have spent loads of money convincing you that these are the ways you need to do things. Do it because it reaches the right audience. And so, of course, with the media you have, the channels that you have to reach so many people, you know, you've got everything from handing out flyers in the street and sticking up posters in, you know, in a newsagent window, through to obviously, you know, paying for advertising in different magazines, on radio shows, on television, even, you know, potentially, and so on, through to sponsorship of events, partnerships with other, you know, content providers. You can run events, you can be part of events, you can, you know, go to events where people are going to be, whether that's conferences or talking, you know, on panels or whatever it might be. You know, all of these different options that are out there to kind of say, actually, this is who we are, this is the story we're telling, so to different audiences, and they may have different channels, and you need to work out the way to get to them. And then to sum up, I suppose, all of it, the one thing to always remember is you are only ever talking to one person at a time. Even if you've got a TV ad on TV and it's being seen by 10 million people in the middle of Coronation Street or whatever, those people are experiencing it directly to themselves. So if you want to communicate with them, if you want them to get excited, it needs to speak to that individual and tell them why it goes back to what we were talking about before, why it's interesting. And, you know, they're in that channel because they're someone, you know, they're the person that's watching television that you're trying to reach, or social media, or just the flyer outside Asda. And if you start to think of it that way, and you think of it, as I said earlier, for yourself as well, you know, when you consume an advert or a sales pitch or see a piece of information about anything, you just see it for yourself, right? You don't think about it in some hierarchy of marketing, right? In a framework, nothing to do with anything. So you just go, okay, yeah, that's of interest to me. And if you remember all of that, you can remember that your message has to be crafted to the particular audience, the particular individual, and the needs they have and the desires they have. I suppose what I would say, just was obviously, if that's panicking you as someone who's kind of got, you know, not much resource, not much time, and so on. I think, Michael, you said this already earlier, so I'll reference back to it. You've got to find that focus. Find the thing to focus on, and then only put all your energy and your effort into doing that. And then once you grow, you know, if you're an Amazons of the world, a Samsung, or, you know, the BBC or something, yeah, great. You're talking to literally hundreds of different audience segmentations and so on all the time. But that's just in line with the resource that you have available. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, thinking about what we normally do for organizations, and they do tend to be startups and scale-ups, and even if they're not, they tend to be quite focused. We always would start with what's the core story cube or the value proposition. What's that story that needs to be shared? And then even if they are a big organization and they have sales and marketing people that are comfortable presenting that story, they can adapt that on the fly or in their own time to different audiences based on the conversations they had. And they might have, particularly when it's down to fundraising, a lot of those conversations are privately done. It's not sort of one big email and sent out to thousands of people or a big presentation. It's one-on-one discussion. And so they will adapt that story cube, keeping in mind the key points that they need to share. But for organizations that are a bit bigger and perhaps have more specific target audiences, and they have specific products to reach them, and therefore it's important, we can be commissioned to take that core story cube and segment it. And I just think of it as, well, different paragraphs or different A4 sheets, if you want to get very practical about it. You've got your main story on one sheet. You take that, duplicate it, and then think about that core audience. Maybe you're talking to businesses this time, or maybe it's talking to the young people that are being supported, or maybe it's talking to the teachers within schools that are therefore going to support the young people, and they need to understand what the benefits are. And especially when working with the organizations within the social sprint that we worked on together, it was a case of talking about, well, who are you speaking with now? Quite often during your week, you're having conversations with different audience types. We need to get under the skin of what their pain points are and what the things that are going to really intrigue them about their benefits and the gains that they can create from this. Every conversation is slightly different, and we just need to go through that process a number of times and learn from each one, so that we have kind of a cheat sheet to go back to and go, I've heard that before. We've been here before, and this is what we did for this customer, or this is how we helped this person, and this is how we solved the problem in this way. From that, you can build out to animations, which we've done for organizations. Quite often we try and start with one, but particularly if they've got a two-sided marketplace. I'm thinking of one organization that was helping companies recruit employees, and therefore helping employees get recruited for the companies. Two different discussions, but we started with one animation to say, look, we are the central point where companies can meet employees and vice versa. But then building on that, they had separate events and marketing materials going out to these two distinct groups who needed to hear about the benefits in slightly different ways. So therefore two animations were created. But ultimately it's 2 A4 sheets of paper with a script, and 80-90% of it was the same. But there's those elements that just to highlight, here are the key benefits for you, Mr. Company, and here are the key benefits for you, Miss Employee. And these are the things that you should take away. If you don't remember anything else, take away these 2 bits of information. And that's a big challenge of it. And then lastly, if we are thinking about the Amazons and Googles and BBC and Virgins of the world, when a business is big and has multiple products and services, and they're servicing lots and lots of different types of organizations, they need to be known for one thing, that whatever they do, they tend to do it well. They might not hit the mark every time. Every one of those organizations I've listed doesn't have a brilliant product every single time, but you could be convinced, and Amazon bucks a trend on being niche because they're so big now. If they launch a security system, which they've got for houses, because they tend to buy out companies and rebrand them, or the delivery system, or bookseller, or whatever they do next, I think they've got an airline as well, or they're looking into it, you know that it's got a good chance of being good. It's worth a look, and therefore they will probably find an audience, and therefore the main focus there at that part is on the brand itself, that what they touch will probably be high quality and affordable and something worth having a look at. And that's something to consider when organizations get much bigger. It's no longer about the core story, but then deeper down, for each one of those products, they will need a value proposition as well. And they'll need to go back to those core stories as people go further through that discussion and want to know more about the product. But that could be touch point 6, 7, or 8, rather than the first touch point of going, well, who is this company and why should I care?
Yeah, that's what I love about the Story Cube. It gives you that core framework, like you say, which is 80-90% of the hard work done. And then, like you say, you craft it to those prioritized audiences, and that feels more manageable for organizations who have the ever constrained resources, which I think that's why it's really, really useful, and makes this process feel more doable for the organizations. And I think that's the overarching point from both of the discussions here is we want to try and get organizations just to go out there and try this stuff, because without trying you don't learn, and then you can't go forward.
Yeah, that's actually one of the keys with the Story Cube. I think you say enough to entice and intrigue, but not too much that they don't ask any questions, because you want it to be a discussion with whoever you're talking to, even if it's a bit of a one-way sort of conversation where you have a website or you're announcing something on social media. You do want to say just enough for them to go, what's next? and how does that work, and where do I fit in, and what can I do next to test out this product. So if you don't have that, then it's not a conversation, and you won't learn from your audience. So it's important to leave that gap.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, both. That's been really insightful. Thanks for your time. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.